Torn.
Mhm. Good morning, Dr. Fuller.
Good morning, Mr. Brown. How are you, sir?
Doing good. As you know, I'm out here in Albuquerque. Going to be spending a week with my son and bringing him back home to Tennessee.
Excellent. You can win money in bars if you can spell Albuquerque. So
I have no idea. We got a good show today. We're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about today, Dr. Fuller?
I think we're going to talk about the last week or the first week of the last reign of 47.
I don't know. There's some congressmen trying to push for a third term.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. I don't think that'll make it, but and of course that's just horrifying a lot of people that are on the other side of the aisle, I think.
Oh yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah.
But I guess we could kind of start while we're waiting for folks to jump on. I pulled this from whitehouse.gov. Quote, with the first 100 hours of his second administration, President Trump, and this is their poor grammar, so pardon me, President Trump taken hundreds of executive actions to secure the border, deport criminal and illegal immigrants, unleash American prosperity, lower costs, increase government transparency, and reinstitute merit-based hiring in the federal government. The president has already secured over $1 trillion in historic new investments. What are your general thoughts on the first week?
I think the best way I can put it, I think, is he's hit the ground much more organized this time than he did last time. I think he's come to realize what a lot of people take time to realize, and he had that first term to do it, is, the president has his greatest asset is time, right? I mean, he's got 4 years in the seat. He comes in a lame duck this time around. He knows he's on the clock. And he, last time, for example, the executive orders he put in mostly were, symbolic, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't really make any substantive jumps the last time around in the first tranche. Not the case this time. Not the case. And I think that's a combination of things. I think President Biden set a precedent when he came in with the way he kicked over a lot of anthills, and that opened that door. And honestly, for me, I'm seeing a lot of that over the last few administrations. That pendulum that generally kind of swings in the center is really starting to swing to the outliers. We're seeing more extremist candidates. I mean, maybe that's a harsh word to use, but Trump's as close to a straight up nationalist president as we've had in a long time. And, the Biden administration and certainly the Harris administration had it come in would have been the closest we had to a straight socialist ticket. Yep. And neither one of those would have washed 50 years ago. Neither one of them would have gotten off the ground, but that's what we've got now. And we're seeing that echoed in Congress, and that national polarization is taking place all over this country. And we see it in our daily lives. But I think that the president had a plan. Now, you may agree with it, you may disagree with it, but he had a plan, and he's hit the ground doing exactly that. And he's acting like a man who's on the clock, right? This looks like a hurry up offense. And that will certainly engender change, which a lot of people are obviously applauding. I think a lot of your audience is going to applaud that, but it's going to do a lot of damage along the way, and not all of that will be good, I think. And we can talk about that more as the show goes on.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I agree with you. I think talking about the potential collateral damage along the way from some of these things is going to be tying up a lot of our conversation. Yeah.
And we talk about meritocracy. So far, it looks a lot like some of my friends are calling it a bro-ocracy. We talk about, okay, we're going to put in people that are the best people that are ready to go. But so far, the heads of agencies that he's put in a lot of times may be qualified, but they are, I would argue that some of them are not the best qualified that he could find. What they are, or at least by my standard of best. By his standard of best, it seems to be, the chief requirement is loyalty. And by that standard, certainly these people are clearing that hurdle. And a lot of people that he put around the first time are not here anymore because they were not perceived as being loyal enough.
It's interesting. I do want to dig into that one before we go much further. I want to welcome some folks on. Tony is on. Good morning, Tony. Alan Kelly, our good friend up there in occupied Virginia. Mr. Will Parker out in Montana, coin number 800. Joseph is on from Vermont. John Shriver from Yukon, Oklahoma. Thank you guys for being on with Dr. Fuller and I this morning. Let's talk about the bureaucracy concept, because I disagree with that, and here's why. There was a guy, he went on to be an FBI agent, but he was a Marine Corps officer first.
Good looking fella, I imagine.
I would imagine so. I've looked him up. I've never been able to find his face. I don't know if he went into counterintelligence or something in the Bureau, but he wrote a book as part of his master's thesis called Winning the Recruiting War. And he was in Marine Corps recruiting as an operations officer, which is what I did. And it was a very good book. So much so, like I said, the Marine Corps bought it and handed it out to everybody going on recruiting duty. And one of the things is he talks about, you got to grow your own. If I've got a call from Vermont going, oh man, Chief Warrant Officer Brown, you need to take Gunny Fuller. This guy's the bee's knees. Look at his stats and da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, I'm looking at that guy with a jaundiced eye. I would rather grow my own. I bring in this guy. He comes with all the flavors of Vermont and the way y'all do your maple syrup up there. It's just it may not be the right fit for Tennessee and the way that the commander and his command staff have laid the battle space out. So, I mean, I've had enough of the Leon Panettas of the world. I mean, just to name him as a swamp critter and all those like him. And yes, they may bring some competency, but they, by all means, know how the sausage is made. But at the same time, we just get status quo. And I think status quo has gotten us into a pretty big pickle. So I'm looking forward to, because those that voted for Trump, myself included, handed this gentleman a mandate. And it wasn't for more Panetta. It was, we got to right the ship. And riding a national ship is like, turning a locomotive. It takes time. But it also, you got to be aggressive and you got to be fast. And I think we're seeing that.
Oh, you're definitely seeing all that. And I think your argument has certain merit. And again, the president is welcome to put whoever in charge he wants to put in charge. That was a precedent set by George Washington. It's been echoed for the last couple hundred years. So I don't begrudge the fact that he's doing these things. I think he could make better choices. I think there are stronger
Would
people.
you care to name one off the top of your head?
Well, I'll start with the one that's closest to my, sort of comfort zone, which would be Kash Patel. I'm not saying he's not a Trump loyalist, but I am saying that the man has 7 years in federal government, most of which was spent trying to move up the chain in federal government in the Trump era. And if you read his book, and I'm sure you've watched some of his interviews. I've read his book. I've read
Government Gangsters.
Government Gangsters. It's going to make it very difficult for him to lead that organization if he's trying to, actually lead it. If he's coming in as, a corporate assassin, he's coming in there to gut the place, then he's probably the right guy. And if that's what the president wants, then he's probably got the right guy. If he's looking for someone to actually lead the organization and conduct the business of the FBI, that's probably not the best choice, because he simply doesn't understand the organization. I mean, you read his book, and if you go in there and read, for example, about his FISA work, it's pretty clear from those of us who've actually done FISA work, and I, by no means, been an expert on FISA. Right? I've probably got half a dozen of those under my belt in a 20-year career, because I just don't like them. And not from a philosophical perspective, because they're very, very difficult. It's very easy to get in trouble very quickly. He just doesn't understand how they're done, according to what's in his book. And he's going to now be in charge of those things. And, FISA court is one of those things that everybody hears about, and there's a lot of hot button. People get really wrapped around the axle at the FISA court. And I understand that. Okay. It's echoes of the Star Chamber, right? I get that. But if you've ever had to actually deal with FISA court warrants and actually dealt with the FISA court at all, it's a bureaucratic nightmare. There are so many people that look at what you do, including Congress, by the way. And it's so easy to get what we call an IOB violation, Intelligence Oversight Board, that you can get jammed up in a heartbeat. And I know people that, if they've got a strong FISA going, they have to renew it every 90 days. And it's a 45-day process to renew it. So
let me say, American citizen, I'm happy that those protections are there.
I have no problem with that either. But it makes it, my point to all that is, it's very difficult to abuse. It's very difficult to abuse. And if you are successfully abusing it, you are abusing it in the full bright light of day. And there are
Mm-hmm.
literally 50 people that will have their fingerprints on that abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And in his book, he kind of misrepresents things. He says that, okay, any errors that were made in these FISA courts were deliberate conspiracies by the director of the FBI and the head of the Department of Justice. And I'm like, that's not what they're doing. That's not what they're signing. That's not, it's an excellent book in terms of raising profile and putting yourself into the political sphere and ending up as the director of the FBI, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's very much a loyalist tone. But for the people that the organization he's about to, provided he passes his vetting process by Congress, about to take over, it makes it very, very difficult, I think, for people to get in line behind him. And that will make it difficult for him to make the changes he wants to make. Because as you know, you can come in as a battalion commander or a division commander, and you can say, this is the way we're going to go. You can make all the policy decisions you want, and some of them can be great. But unless you get the policy actors on board, the people who are actually going to do the work, your policies are going to have a very, very difficult time going anywhere. And they'll almost no odds that they will stick, that you're going to make cultural changes. You have to get buy-in from the people that are actually doing things.
And again, we come from two different cultures, and I think the cultures are showing themselves now, because the CEO of RS Richmond was fired in 2005 when the Marine Corps started missing mission, and it was front page news on the New York Times, like for the first time in decades. The Marine Corps finally missing. Well, we were missing mission because we had body bags full of Marines coming home all the time. It was the surge, and the commandant also got emotionally wrapped up in. He's like, I still got sand on my freaking boots. I just flew back in here, and I don't want to hear about recruiters having problems. We're like, we don't have enough bodies. I got 39 sectors, and 9 of them are empty. Everybody's crushing it. They're doing everything they can. I just don't have enough bodies. It's no different than the guys on the ground over there. I don't have, so he didn't want to hear it. Where I'm going with this is the commandant fires the commanding officer of RS Richmond, literally drives down from Washington, D.C. You're fired. Sergeant Major, you're fired, and fires 2 or 3 other people.
Ouch.
He appoints my CO to fly up from Louisville that Friday night, first plane out of town, without any clothes, just go. So I followed on the next day with his clothes and my clothes. And first thing he did was, we're having a formation tomorrow morning at 06 a.m. Everybody come in from all over Virginia and that whole area. And he had a stack of page 11. Anybody that was late, you got a page 11 and an adverse fitness report, and your career was done. We're not here to talk about recruiting. We're to talk about being a Marine and accountability and all these other things. Meanwhile, they're looking at the clock like, sir, we need to start making phone calls. We're not making a damn phone call yet. I don't give a shit. We'll throw all the recruiting stuff out the door. I got to get you back to being a fucking Marine, pardon my French. I don't need buy-in. I'm going to get buy-in, I'm going to fire you. And he did, because he had the commandant's blessing to, if they're not helping the situation, they're gone. And guess what? Richmond is still crushing it. They've never missed a beat. But I mean, he literally, like, the plaques on the wall, everything was thrown out. Everything. He changed the challenge coin. He changed their motto. He changed everything. And that's my point.
And my question then was, this the man making these decisions, had he 2 weeks earlier been working at the Pentagon on budget analysis for the Air Force? No. He was a guy who was a career Marine, right? Mm-hmm. So he understood the culture. When he said it's back to being Marine, he knew what he was talking about, right?
True.
Nobody in that room said, buddy, you don't even know where the Marine Corps or 8th and I is. You can't find the commandant. Nobody was saying that. That's the problem Patel is going to face. Mm-hmm. He's not an FBI agent, okay? Mm-hmm. So that can be good, right? Because he's not steeped in that culture. He's not going to be as likely to fall into groupthink, right? Which is a severe problem. But at the same time, when he says, I want to talk to this guy in FBI headquarters, one of two things is going to happen. One, he's going to tell that person's going to have to come to him. Or two, someone's going to have to walk him to that guy's office because he'll never find it on his own. All right. And this is my concern, is how would buy-in have looked in the scenario you just painted if some guy came in who a week earlier had been at Staples for a career and had done good stuff, but he came in there and said, we are going to change this culture? What would you as policy actors, how would your reaction have been to that? You can't even spell Marine Corps culture.
No, you're absolutely right. The only thing I would say is, because we are so hierarchical and authoritarian, if the comment I was saying there go, you do what this guy says or your head will be on a stick in the front yard. Like, oh, okay. Right. I like my career. I've got 10 years left. I want to keep it.
Okay. And I get that. But again, you've got a Marine making that call.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so here's a situation where the president comes in and says, your head's going to be a stick in the yard, and I'm bringing in this guy from Staples. If that guy can't lead, if he can't get your buy-in, then you will work. My suggestion, my concern is you will work just hard enough to not get fired because you don't have buy-in. You don't believe this guy. You need a leader, right? If the Marine Corps didn't need leaders, they wouldn't train leaders. They would just hire people off the street. 19 years old, you're now in charge because the commandant says you're in charge. And that 30-year gunny down there, he's going to do exactly what you said, or I'm going to put his head on a stick. How hard is that gunny going to work? And forget the gunny. He's a professional. Let's talk about the E4 mafia. You're going to get those guys to do it? Come on. You have to get buy-in. And I think that's a challenge that Patel and others like him in government, that the president is coming in with all the best intentions, are going to face. And that's if the buy-in, that's if the changes they want to make are palatable.
I think buy-in, I'm a big fan of buy-in. We talk about that, especially on recruiting, because everybody there is a salesperson, right? They've been through 9 weeks of recruiting school, 9-month certification cycle to earn that MOS. So yeah, buy-in is a big thing. But if you're a bad actor, I'm not getting buy-in. I'm going to smoke you. You're standing on plastic every day.
Sure.
And I can't wait to drop the hammer.
Right. But that's also if you've bought in. What if you haven't bought in also and you've got the hammer? And now you're going to have discretionary authority in that position. So if you aren't bought in off the mission as the warrant, as the battalion commander, are you going to really wield that hammer as vigorously as if you are bought in on the mission? Maybe. Is that going to be a universal truth? It's a concern. And I will tell you, from 20 years in the Bureau, that ship is hard to turn. It is a very hidebound organization. Like any law enforcement bureaucracy, I think you can say the same. I'm sure Alan Kelly can talk for days on the Virginia State Police and their perspective on such things. If you want to really correct the problem, there are things you can do. I think, and Patel will be in a good position to do that, but it's going to be an uphill push. And I don't know that he's the perfect guy to fix the organization. He can certainly hammer people in the organization. The answer to Tony's question here, was there one director who was a former agent? Yeah, that was Louis Free, who was the director that when I came in.
Well, how do these other guys maneuver around, without that background? Yeah,
Louis Free was an exception, obviously, because he was an agent before. And the others there's a lot of judges, a lot of former judges. I think Hoover's an outlier because he largely created the organization and the image he wanted. And he was there for 42 years or whatever it was. So, it kind of went the way he wanted things to go. The others have demonstrated lengthy experience in not just government, but in the Department of Justice, working as United States attorneys, working in DOJ for the time.
That he fills that bill, wouldn't he?
I'm sorry?
Cash could say that he fills that bill.
He could, prosecutor, but I would disagree with him. And I would disagree simply because he spent time down in Miami-Dade as a defense attorney. Okay, he's got time on the other side of the aisle, if you will, from the prosecutors. But it's a different animal when you get into prosecution. And when he was on the DOJ, his book will tell you that he's done great and glorious things, and it's very self-aggrandizing. It's very much that I was the only one. It was only me. Thank God I was there. It's a lot and you kind of expect that from a politician. But the reality is, if you're a new person at the Department of Justice, they're not putting you in charge of anything. You're not prosecuting anything out of the DOJ. Okay, you're advising the people that are prosecuting down in the districts. And again, if you're trying to make yourself look good and you want to move up in the world, then you tell people how great you are, right? That's a long-standing tradition. I mean, I've got a shelf full of books back here by politicians that all do that. Gavin de Becker does it in The Gift of Fear, right? I mean, so that's nothing new. It's nothing to throw rocks at anybody about. But it does cause a concern when you change the perspective, at least for me. When I stop looking at it as a politician, start looking at it as you're going to be in charge of the FBI. I think it would have been easier to find a person of long-standing experience with the criminal justice system. I like judges in there because they're used to telling politicians to pound sand. They're used to saying, this is what we're going to do because it's right and legal, not because it's what somebody is telling me to do. And again, if the president wants to put someone in that is going to run an independent agency like the FBI that is independent, then you get like a Bill Clinton, Louis Freeh construct where those guys didn't get along because Louis Freeh followed the law and sometimes Clinton wasn't always super happy about the priorities. I think we would see a more extreme reaction from this president if you put somebody in who is independent, because loyalty is a big priority for him. And perceived disloyalty, you get hammered for. You get fired. You get tossed. You lose your security team, and what have you. And look, Trump has painted himself as a reformist this time around. A hardcore. He talked a lot about draining the swamp the last time he was in, but he didn't make a whole lot of headway doing that. I think we're going to see headway this time, but I think there's going to be a lot of pain involved. Our federal government has evolved to the point it's at now over the course of decades, and to in one 4-year administration slash it the way he's currently kind of headed, you're gonna throw a lot of babies out with the bathwater. There's gonna be a lot of good people that are gonna go. There's gonna be a lot of damage done. Not all of it will be constructive.
Yeah, I guess, man, my government service is really jaded because I would be begging for a cash patel. Because I found that, there was a lot of people that, well, I don't want to go down that road. It's
read his book, Rich. Read his book.
I definitely will. I need to.
Definitely.
And I would imagine that's how Pete Hegseth got his job. He wrote the book, The War on Warriors. Don Jr., somebody read it. He was already a high-profile guy. They're like, yeah, this is the guy we need. Cash Patel writes Government Gangsters. Trump knew him and like, okay, this is what we need. And I imagine there was a lot of that going on.
Yeah, I think so. Another struggle that Patel's going to face is he names people by name in his book. And look, if you are outside of government and you see that, you're like, finally, we're putting names to the deep state, sort of an undefined term, but okay, we're putting names to these guys. Well, there's at least one active FBI agent in there. And now you're going to be the director of the FBI, and that guy's still on the job.
He may not be for long.
Well, and I will tell you what, Rich, I would go the other way. I think that guy's bulletproof.
Really?
He may lose his job, but he is going to get fat wealthy if it happens. Because what's he going to say? Because the first thing that happens if you fire that guy for any reason, come up with a reason, he's going to sue. And so he sues, right? And and maybe the government's okay with giving the guy a couple $1 million and sending him out the door. Fine, they're not. It's not their money. It is my money. It's your money. And there's going to be a lot of that. I think that you can hack and slash at Twitter fairly easily, but when you start going and firing government employees and letting them go, you have to have a reason. And if you don't, there are laws that protect these people. And again, if you're okay with just saying, screw it, I don't care, we'll pay the money, send them on their way, you can do that. But you're going to pay the money, and you're going to get hammered, and it's going to get drawn out over the course of years, right?
I will tell you, I wasn't going to say this, but I'll say it, because the Marine Corps will tell you day one in boot camp, there's never been a mutiny of Marines. Since November the 10th, 1775, there's never been a mutiny. I saw a mutiny, and the mutiny went like this. We got a new commanding officer, J.D. Alford, who ended up retiring as a major general, but he's a brand new major. This is his, he just won the Leftwich Trophy for leadership in the Marine Corps. He's a rising star, former football player. He's the man in the Marine Corps. And they send him to this shithole called Nashville, Tennessee, to command the volunteer state. Well, they don't like it that he's coming in bringing the true Marine Corps to recruiting. So this one rogue gunny and a bunch of other staff NCOs meet at this undisclosed location to talk about, we're just going to sit on our hands, do the bare minimum. They'll fire him here in 6 months or so, and it'll go back to the old ways. And, and I remember the Marine Corps hit team came down, and, he came in crying. The CO did, this big, brave guy with 2 Bronze Stars already at that time. It's like, boys are going to fire me. I'm going to go home to Georgia and get on the farm. And, we got one chance to make mission. And he ended up, and this is right prior to, he found out about the mutiny and fired the 5 actors and put in me and 4 other staff sergeants, brand new staff sergeants, because we'd been writing numbers. I say all that to say, you got to get rid of those people. And I don't care where you put them. They could sit home awaiting orders for years. They can sue anybody they want to. That's why we have lawyers. Let them sort that out. But they got to get those cancerous people out. I'm just a firm believer in it. Success can't happen until we cut the cancer out. Now, am I saying everybody in the Bureau's cancer? No. But will he be surgical or will he come in with a hammer? I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you're wrong in that regard, Rich. Please don't misunderstand me. What I am saying is, like we talk about on the show all the time, you and Rich talk about it, or you and Will talk about it quite a bit. There's a cost, right? If you're going to do this, there's going to be a cost. And keep in mind, the FBI and other government agencies do actually perform a service. And it's a service that in large part our society has come to depend on. So if you start hammering these organizations and doing it fast, which I think this president has to do because he's only got 4 years, and I think he's going to get tied up in a lot of litigation here fairly quickly, then you're going to be fairly indiscriminate, because you're going to go after that cancer. And, my mother had cancer, to extend that metaphor, when I was a child, and she had it in her lung. And rather than cut the cancer out or treat it with chemo, shrink it, and then cut it out, they just took the whole lung. Okay. But that was state of the art 50 years ago.
Right.
So, again, maybe this is the decision he wants to make. That's fine. You're asking T.C. Fuller if he thinks that's the best. I don't. I think you can be much more circumspect about it. And the other thing to keep in mind is a lot of people in the FBI know the FBI needs some help. A lot of people in the FBI want it to get help. A lot of the reputational problems the FBI, for example, has now comes from media. It comes honestly from Trump. For the last 8 years, he's come after him pretty good. I'm not saying all of it. I'm saying
okay.
It's a contributing factor.
I know.
Right. Yeah. And there are absolutely mistakes. I mean, I can point to a bunch of them myself. I understand it. Point is, if you're, again, recruit command, and you're in, what was the name of your last unit where you were your highest rank?
I was the deputy director of recruiting operations for the entire Southeast United States.
If you come in and you're in that position, and all you say all the time to anybody that will listen to you is, my Marines suck, they're horrible recruiters, they're criminals, they need to be replaced. Well, what's going to happen? That's going to echo out, right? That
can't do that message. No, absolutely.
You can't do that message. And that's my point. Right now we have a president that's been sending that message for a long time. Now, I'm not saying that that's the entire issue. What I am saying is, I had some fantastic units that I was fortunate enough to be in and at command. But when I was a commander of a unit, there wasn't a better unit in the entire United States Army than my unit. Period. Full stop. At one point, I was a captain, and I had a command of 6 guys. As far as I was concerned, we could take Baghdad, we could take Moscow, we'd do it all. And anybody that would listen to me, I'd tell them. Now, was it hyperbole? Maybe. But you know what? My troops would chew through barbed wire.
Sure.
If that was the mission. Okay. And that's my point here, is I'm not saying that, it's Trump's fault that we've got an FBI agent taking a bribe from a Syrian gangster in New York. All right. I'm not saying that's his problem. What I am saying is that when the president gets up and says, Rich Brown sucks, that's going to echo. The media is going to pick that up. The media is going to run with it. And if Rich Brown then makes a mistake, it's just going to feed into that narrative.
But if I heard an outside agent say that, and I'm going to just name somebody here, uh, who's a real person, so I'm not necessarily saying him, but Colonel Brian Manthe sucks. And if I get in charge of the Marine Corps, that dude's head's going to be on a stick. And I know that he's a POS. I'm like, please, God, get in here, save us. Like,
Right.
So I think some of the ground level agents, they know who these people are that are worthless, that are at the J. Edgar Hoover building, sucking up oxygen and making their lives miserable. And they're probably praying for somebody like that to come in there and get rid of some of that dead wood.
But that will be the challenge Patel will face, because he doesn't know the system. He doesn't know the organization. He doesn't know these people. I mean, you know who the current director of the FBI is, right? As we sit here right now.
Yeah.
I sent you a picture.
Yeah.
For your audience members that don't know, understand that Director Ray, who was the director the morning of the inauguration, he resigned that day, as he had said he was going to, and as I think President Trump, it was kind of his desire, was that he resigned. So not the end of the world. The number 2 guy was a guy by the name of Abate, universally disliked amongst the people that I know, made some wildly bad decisions, some of them ethically questionable, in my mind, in my opinion. And people were kind of dreading that he was going to take over. So he falls, in my worldview, he falls into that category of folks that, we're better off without. He was going to be the director that day. He resigned that day, or he retired that day. He said, I'm retiring effective immediately. And he was already on an extension, so it was a very easy thing to do. But bang, the top 2 people in the FBI are gone that day. Mm-hmm. So what happens? Apparently, what happens is President Trump turns to Kash Patel and says, hey, who do we want to run the place until I can get you in there? He says, there's a guy in Newark. Now, that guy in Newark had been the SAC of Newark for 6 days. 6 days. Prior to that, he was in what we call SIRG. So he was in charge of, SIRG has a lot of our SWAT guys and our negotiators. And, so he was a fairly ranking guy. But he went from...
It's on the crisis team or whatever?
Yeah, the crisis incident response group, I think is what it falls into. So SIRG. But they got all the really hoo-yah, gee-whiz guys. And he had previously been HRT guy. I think he was at HRT when I was at Firearms Training Unit. So he was a middling manager. So, picture a battalion commander. And he comes in one day and says, hey, next week you're going to be a brigade commander. Cool. He takes over the brigade. 6 days later, hey, guess what? You're the commandant of the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. So that's who's in charge right now. So I'm not saying he's incompetent. I'm not saying he doesn't know what he's doing. I'm saying that's a hell of a jump. And it falls into that kind of broocracy, because apparently he was involved with Libya at the same time Kash Patel was, and they had a beer or something. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But that's where their paths crossed. And now he's the director of the FBI. So is he good? Is he bad? Is he indifferent? I don't know. I would say he's probably, drinking from the fire hose of knowledge right now. I mean, mm-hmm. And in doing that, of course, you jump over 2 or 3 levels of critical command. Well, not all those people are going to be super happy about that. And, is that the end of the world? No, probably not in terms of, leadership and management, but it is fairly problematic in terms of running the day-to-day mm-hmm. in the organization. For me, I think a better way to approach correcting the ship is offer a buyout to senior mm-hmm. people.
100%.
Come in and say, look, you're senior, you want to go, here's a carrot. You can go early, here's, we'll buy you out and off you go. And, it's not unprecedented in the FBI to have buyouts. Mm-hmm. Especially, I think you'd have a lot of people, wanting to buy out because they don't like the president. They don't like, what the writing that's on the wall. So I think you'd lose a lot of your problematic people right off the bat at the top levels. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the ones that you really have to get, right? You've got to get the top ones out so that you can straighten out the bottom ones who are going to be here 15, 20 years. So you offer the buyout, and then you come in and you start your purge, right? Then you start looking for the people that you really know need to go. And you go.
Oh, you want to stay? Okay, cool.
Right.
Glad you stayed. Check this out.
So you had the carrot. You opted not to take the carrot. Here comes the stick. Mm-hmm. Right? And now, as you selectively wield the stick, then you get the people that stick around to go, okay, this is serious. I got to either, it's time to fish or cut bait. Mm-hmm. You remember when Saddam Hussein took over the Ba'ath Party and he became the president of whatever their political.
He had the big purge.
But he actually brought the guy in and said, okay, here's Congress. Here's 500, 1,000 people in the room. who were the conspirators,
Yeah.
right? So he picked, and I'm not saying this is the way to do things, but what I'm saying is you can't argue with its efficacy.
Yes.
And, people were selected in the room, taken out back, bolt in the back of the neck, done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, metaphorically speaking, if you come in and you have the people that you want to go and you have a reason, and you say, look, you got to go. The ones that you can't bang out right away, like you said, you can put them in nowhere jobs. We used to call some folks at the FBI headquarters building hall walkers because they didn't have an office. They didn't have any kind of a portfolio. They just had a job at headquarters and they just kind of meandered around the building all day. You can do stuff like that. You can send people to places they don't want to go, and you can move them around. There are ways within the bureaucratic framework to get rid of the people you need to get rid of, but you're much more selective. And the people that stick around, that survive that, you've got their attention, right? And you've got them on board. I think that might be a more palatable approach. I think it might be an approach that gets the buy-in of those policy actors at the lower levels. They're going to be, like you were saying, thank God that guy's gone. Let's get back to work.
Amen. Yeah.
And one thing that Patel has said that I do agree with is the vast majority of agents, they didn't join the FBI to not work. They didn't join the FBI to commit crime. They didn't join the FBI to commit conspiracy. They joined the FBI to go get bad people and put them in bad places. And you free them up to do that. That's what they're going to do.
And I'm not, as you know, I'm not coming in as a layperson to the FBI that much. I mean, I've trained a lot of agents over the last 10 years, and I have nothing but the utmost love and respect for every damn one of them I've met. I mean, they've top shelf to the man and woman. I've never met one of them that I thought, well, how did he get in here? Which shows me the selection, the recruitment, whatever you guys are doing works. Now, I cannot say that for the things that I hear relative to what's coming down from them from above. And some of that's troops bitch, and that's just what they do, right? But at the same time, I believe, we deserve it to the guys out there doing the job to give them the best possible leadership. That, and to your point, they got to understand what is the mission. And that's why I think Cash is going to return it to the mission.
I certainly hope so. I really do. I mean, at this point, I'm willing to say I have concerns.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to say the man's a disaster.
Yeah. Well, Tony says, we've had an administrative oligarchy for decades. That's the swamp. Can't appoint swamp creatures to drain their own. No, they won't.
They won't. But also, I would suggest, running off that metaphor, that the swamp is the structure. It's the infrastructure. It's the organizational structure. It's supported by swamp creatures, without a doubt. But we need to make substantive changes to the way these organizations are structured. And again, I'm using the FBI but you can extend this out to any of the large bureaucracies.
Yeah. Department of Education, whatever, DOD.
But the FBI, for example, there's no leader, and I talk about this in my book, which you should buy, there's no leadership training for our leaders.
It's crazy.
Which is mind-blowing to me to this day. We provide leadership training to local, state, federal, tribal law enforcement officers, of all people from other parts of the planet. But we don't train our own. There's no leadership training requirement to climb the ranks of the FBI. And that to me is ludicrous. We do that for an E2 in the Marine Corps. How many leadership schools did you go to?
Well, there's the corporal's course, which is 4 to 5 weeks. There's sergeant's course, 6 to 8 weeks. There's the staff academy, which is another 8 or 9 weeks. And then all your other schools. And those are just where we bring every Marine, regardless if you're back to the fold, and go, we're going to focus on basic Marine Corps stuff. You've been over here fixing airplanes or blowing stuff up or whatever you've been doing. We're going to regreen you and put you back, and teach you how to lead
from E4 to E5. Oh, you want to go E5 to E6? Here's another school for you.
Right.
But we don't do that for the FBI. And that's just ludicrous to me. It's absolutely ludicrous. And to your point earlier, Rich, you and I are great friends, and we can have these kind of conversations, sometimes painful, but there's no recrimination, right? We can have respectful conversation. And I think we need to make sure that comes back into our federal government processes. In my mind, you can disagree with whoever's in the Oval Office without, with individual policies, and still generally agree with the direction they go. I think we've gotten to a point where it's an all or nothing for everyone. Everybody either loves the one on the left or loves the one on the right. And as a result, their opponent is always wrong. Everything they've done is wrong and criminal and stupid and all kinds of ad hominem attacks. And therefore, everything my guy does is perfect. And I don't think we owe our political leadership, our party leadership, that kind of blind obvious.
It's lazy to think.
Slothful, exactly.
Yeah.
Critical thought still needs to be applied. And you may generally agree with Trump's direction, in my mind, without joining the cult of personality.
100%.
I find that bizarre that we've gotten to a point in this country where if you don't agree with, Kash Patel, therefore you're a rhino. You're not. Right. You don't agree with Kamala Harris, therefore you're a Republican scumbag. No.
Leon Panetta got in with 100-0 was his confirmation. 100-0. And it's like, really, not one person saw issues with some of the questionable things this man did. And I'll throw it to you. If I had to go through a door today, and I could have a DevGru guy right out of Red Squadron, or I could have you, I'm going to take you 100%. You know why? I have high trust in you.
Yeah. And that counts.
Is your proficiency to the level of a active duty Red Squadron operator? No, but I'll take the guy that puts his hand on my shoulder and I know you are going to be there. I'll take that guy any day. So when we talk about bureaucracy, I always twinge a little bit because who's the right guy? Well, it's that combination, that balancing scale between high trust and competency. And I will take low trust, high competency. Don't want you on my team, man. I don't want you.
And my only concern with that bureaucracy thing is you're screaming about meritocracy. You've signed at least one executive order extolling the virtues of meritocracy. You're talking. This is a big pillar. And then for you to turn around and go, yeah, except for this guy, he's my boy. There's a hypocrisy there that is least worthy of noting. I'm not saying that presidents need to stop hiring the people they want to hire, right? I mean, there's 250 years of tradition behind that, and it's worked out fairly well. I would just say that you can't so prioritize that. I mean, I really appreciate what you had to say, but if I was missing a leg and I was 350 pounds, that might impact your decision.
100%. Because you have to have that. It's the balance, right?
Right.
Competency and trust.
Right. And so I would suggest respectfully to those in charge that perhaps we should keep that in mind as we go forward. And I think Patel's publishing of his book is putting him in a tough spot. And some of the interviews he gave has put him in a tough spot. Now, maybe he can recover from that. Maybe he can get people on board. You can lead through terror, right? He can come in and decapitate the place, and that will get people in line. But it will, again, it'll keep people in line just for so long. And, as you well know from working in a government bureaucracy, it's hard to change things. You can get lip service out of people all day long. But what you really want is substantive change and correction of behaviors. And that takes more than just terror. That takes, certainly terror is an attention getter, but you've got to really work. You got to put some effort in.
And that was the essay that it's funny. I wrote that as an essay to the Hogaboom leadership contest when I was on active duty. I didn't win, but they ended up. Yeah, it did publish, and it's ethical based decision making for leaders. And I talk about this, you cannot keep discipline through fear. It will absolutely not work. And I talk about some steps to fix that. So I think we're on the same page with that. And I really enjoyed that discussion. But, we got so much more to cover here.
Absolutely.
I want to really get into Greenland and Panama. What are your thoughts on either one of those?
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I mean, first of all, invasion, I have a problem with on both counts. Military action, I don't think it's the right move. I don't think it's the right image our nation needs to be throwing out there. Certainly not Greenland. All right. But going and buying these places, buying Greenland back from the Danes, it's Denmark that owns Greenland, right?
Yep, that's right.
So, look, and I've had this conversation with other friends of mine. It's not like the United States hasn't bought land before, right? Shiny beads and necklaces got us Manhattan. Who won that one? the most famous one, of course, is the Louisiana Purchase, right? We bought a huge chunk of the western part of North America. Alaska, we bought from
Napoleon was broke,
Russia. And he had a war to fight. He needed the cash. And we got a bargain basement deal on that, I'll tell you what. But we bought Alaska from the Russians because they had no use for it. Trump is the guy that can come up with that idea. It'll be interesting to see if he can pull it off because, there will be a lot of pressure on the other side to push that the Greenland not sell to Trump or Denmark not sell to Trump. So would it be great? I mean, sure. A lot of us have flown through Greenland, on military deployments hither and yon. And should we ever have to reinvade Northern Europe, England was a handy jumping off point previously. But would it be nice to have Greenland? Sure, it'd be nice. I don't know that I would spend a whole lot of my political capital trying to get it. Panama, now there's a strategic reason to have Panama, right? A very strategic reason to have Panama. I wasn't a big fan of Jimmy Carter giving it away, even as a kid. I understand Panamanian sovereignty issues and wanting that land. I get that. For me, and again, I'm not one to say, okay, it's 82nd Airborne, you're going back to Panama, go get it. I would much rather just shore up our relationship with Panama and diplomatic solutions, get some MOUs in place. I get it, I grant it, their paperwork, but should push come to shove, we get some paper that says, whatever we want it to say on Panamanian signatures about the Panama Canal. That's great. And if they, 50 years from now they renege on it, then we have a diplomatic excuse to go in there and take it back. But I would rather see it done diplomatically, or push comes to shove to buy it. But actually invading to take these places, I'm not a fan.
Well, the one thing I will say that I like about what I'm seeing with the 47th president right now is they seem to be using the DIME model, diplomacy, intelligence and information, military and economic as the levers of government, of national power. Whereas the other one was kind of hitting on two cylinders for a long time. So I hope he uses all those levers because he seems to with the Colombian president, which we'll talk about next. But I think with Greenland, if you look at how the Soviets are reopening all these Arctic bases right along the north, and then China went in and was trying to put in 2 bases in Greenland.
I love how you said Soviets, you old bugger.
Yeah, they'll always be Soviets to me.
That's who they are to me.
Yeah. But anyway, I think there's a whole lot of reasons. 50,000 people call it home. I mean, that's like Cumberland County, Tennessee. It's nothing. If they can get their sovereignty away from Denmark, I think they'll, in one referendum, vote to become part of a territory or a potential on a path to become a 51st state. Panama, it looks like if they've reneged on some of the treaties, I don't think an MOU is going to fix it if they've already violated certain treaty agreements made with the Carter administration and allowed China to take over ports, and we're getting unfairly handled. Hopefully we can handle it through, DIE and not the military end of DIME. But I worry about it.
And to your point, I would absolutely agree that, President Trump has come in and acts like the guy who's in charge of the one remaining superpower. He comes in, you can say that he's blundering along like a rampaging bull. The truth of the matter is he's not invading Colombia.
Yep.
Right. He's not invading Panama right now. He's not invading any of these places right now. He's just walking up on you like the great big monster that the United States is economically and militarily and saying, this is what we would like to do. And, oh, by the way, our money is propping up a huge chunk of your economy, whatever country you are. And our military is providing you with safe passage in your oceans. And the reason that you can spend 2% of your GDP or 1% of your GDP on your national defense is because we are taking care of your national defense. We would like something for our investment.
Amen.
And I'm okay with that. I mean, there's a lot of countries, I'm sure you hear this a lot from folks on the left. I hear it a lot. That, we need to be more like, Finland, or we need to be more like Norway, or we need to be more like Sweden in terms of this and that. They're universal this and universal that. Like, it'd be great. And if Sweden was handling, for one, if Sweden had more people than, I don't know, Chicago, then I would listen to them a little bit more. Right? If Norway had more people than North Carolina, that'd be great. But if they would handle the defense of Western Europe and the Pacific and the Atlantic, then we could take all that money that we're spending on them and spend it on our country. And then, yeah, sure, then we would have all these great things, but we don't. And okay, that's great, because let's face it, peace is cheaper than war. But the fact that we are just dumping the money out and getting very little in direct return, I do applaud him in trying to right that particular wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's get a couple of comments here. Alan Kelly says, my department brought in an outside person for superintendent. There were very few positives. However, the negatives were disastrous. Morale hit the toilet. Mark says, please take Canada, make it better, please. And I think Mark is up in Toronto. Will Parker says, if America buys Greenland, I hope the way of life of the Greenland citizen would remain relatively the same for their sake. They may want to change. You never know.
Yeah.
So a lot of things there. The cabinet picks, I'll come back to that one. Let's talk about immigration. And this, I think, is taken directly from the whitehouse.gov. The Trump administration immediately shut down the CBP One app, which paroled, that's according to them, over 1 million illegal immigrants. President Donald Trump signed an executive order to designate cartels as a terrorist organization. And before we get into Colombia, what do you think about the cartel move?
Yeah, that's interesting. Of course, was it you that sent me the link to was the New York Times or the Washington Post saying, "Oh my God, this is going to have a detrimental effect on the United States economy." I'd like that one explained to me. The cartels have been running rampant for a long time, and it's not just United States, you create a market, therefore they're just feeding that market. It's your fault, your problem. Look, Mexico is on the border of becoming a failed narco state. And that would be bad for everyone, particularly the people in Mexico. So, getting these cartels under wraps, the Mexican government has tried for a long time, and it's been very, very difficult for them. And they've lost a lot of people doing it, civilian and military. They clearly need help. The cartels are out of control. They were bad in Colombia for a long time, but guess what happened? They got hammered. Who'd they get hammered by?
JSOC. If you ever read that book, Killing Pablo, it is fantastic. Highly encourage it.
It is. And look, there's a lot of money that the cartels can throw at this problem. They can cause a lot of havoc. I get it. They have access to military grade weapons. You showed the effects of their assaults here on the show. We've talked about it on a show I was on. They're bad dudes, right? Terrorists are bad dudes in general. Cartels are bad dudes in general. I get it. They are not a nation state military force, the likes of which the United States can bring to bear. Period. Full stop. We could send in big army units that would eat them alive. If we send JSOC units in there with all of their intelligence gathering capability, these guys, the movie Sicario has nothing on what would happen. Mm-hmm. It just isn't. I mean, these are nation state forces of the greatest military power the planet has ever seen. They've got recent combat experience going back the last 2 decades. If they decide in the White House and the Pentagon to put these people in play to go in there and wipe out these cartels, I saw an interview recently was it Joe Rogan, where the gentleman suggested they should retire. You got a bunch of money, take it and go. That would be the wise move, because to not take it and go is just going to get you got. So as long as we're not actively invading Mexico, and causing a shooting war with the Mexicans, then I'm okay with it. And frankly, getting Mexican buy-in to say, yeah, you can come do this, it's going to be a sovereignty issue for Mexico. But if they can get over that, if they can give us 5 years or 4 years of the Trump presidency to go in there, then I think a lot of that problem would be solved. And what was Will Parker's question there on the feed? Wouldn't it be in the interest of the U.S. to annex Mexico? It sounds
if they
good.
fail as a nation.
Yeah, I would suggest no, because then you're adopting all of their problems, not just okay, we're going to wipe out their cartels, but now you're inheriting all of their social ills, all of their economic issues. Yeah, I would not suggest. I mean, frankly, I don't think we should annex Puerto Rico. And we've had that country, under our under the dragon's wing for a long time. Mexico would be an order of magnitude worse. And then, crossing the Texas border from Mexico suddenly becomes an interstate drive. You think the fentanyl problem is bad now. It would just get horrendous. So annexing it, no. Setting up a no-go zone along the border, if it's a failed state, probably easier.
Yeah.
Probably have to build a wall. It'd probably upset people.
It'd be a full-on DMZ. I mean, if it does fail,
It does fail. And the best interest of the United States, frankly, is to make sure they don't fail.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Pump in some money, pump in some help, but make them solve their own problems. Right?
Well, that's the thing about the cartel, isn't it? Though, I mean, by designating them a terrorist organization, you can start cutting off money, right? Isn't that one of the big tools they can leverage now?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And, you cut off the money, you cut off a lot of stuff. I mean, that was one of the reasons that 9/11 was as successful as it was from a terrorist perspective, is they had a nation state backing.
Mm-hmm.
They had money, they had training sites, they had passports. I mean, they had all the support of a nation. But you cut off that funding, and it has a big, big impact. I mean, that was a big deal in the early days of the Quad at the FBI. We've set up a couple of squads that all they did was chase the cash.
Yeah.
All they did. And it was effective because you found it and you either cut it off yourself or you told the nation that it was coming from, hey, look, Saudi Arabia, we found all this money and here's the line by which it went from your coffers into the pockets of terrorists who then attacked us. So would you like to fix it or would you like us to fix it?
Mm-hmm.
And, the Saudis being the Saudis, they came in like a force of God and took care of the problem in a lot of ways. Now, I wouldn't maybe take care of the problem's not the right way to put it. Maybe they move the problem around.
Yeah.
But attacking the money is a great way to start.
Yeah, because I mean Sicario does another good job of showing how the tentacles go out into the United States. Like, well, this guy looks like a legitimate businessman, but the money that he's getting to buy up property in Arizona is coming from the cartel. So I can crush him and start moving my way back. I love that. I mean, will it mean boots on the ground in Mexico doing stuff? I don't know. Maybe. And I want to speak to something else. You said Trump's got 4 years to get it done. In my estimation, he's got to the midterm. And we talked about that, right? He's got 18 months and then all of his folks are going to go back to their constituents and try to, get reelected. So the clock is ticking. And I think that's why we're seeing maybe some of the speed. And then I think probably a lot of the executive orders that he's signing, knowing that they can easily be stroked out of existence, he'll try to put a legal framework in there, I would imagine, to codify that into law, don't you think?
Yeah, that would be the smart way to do it, especially if he has both houses.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, his margins are razor thin, so it wouldn't take a whole lot for him to lose on those, which means there's going to be a lot of political dealing. Right? Because if I've cast the deciding vote and I'm a small congressman from Arizona, all of a sudden I'm a player.
Yeah. What are you going to do for me?
Right. Now there's going to be a quid pro quo.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like him or hate him, Trump is that's where he's comfortable. He's comfortable striking deals. He's comfortable with the art of the deal, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So, absolutely he could do that. I mean, he's ripped out the DEI, for example, all over federal government. They're pulling down posters. They're not saying it anymore. I mean, it's in mission statements for some of these organizations.
We're coming to that. I've got a whole thing on that. Yeah, I want to save that one. That's a good one.
Okay. So, it takes time to reinstitute that. So, yeah, he yanks it all out. And let's say the next person that comes in is what's his face from California. He comes in and he reinstitutes it day one. Well, now you've got to hire. You've got to find them offices. You've got to come back in there. What concerns me more is that this has become the norm. This has become the tit for tat that we're seeing. That my guy does XYZ, your guy comes in, removes XYZ and puts in ABC. Well, my next guy comes in, he's going to remove ABC and put in XYZ. That's a lot of wasted time and effort.
It's incredible. At the government level, all that trickles down. By the time they get it sorted out, here comes the new guy. Yeah.
Have you ever been to Egypt? If you take tours, I lived over there for a while. If you take tours of the various monuments, 2,000-3,000 year old tombs and whatnot. You'll find places where things have been etched out. They've been chiseled out of the stone. And the tour guides would tell you that, oh yeah, this is where, Pharaoh Rich Brown took over from Pharaoh T.C. Fuller, and he hated that guy. So he chiseled out his name from all of the official hieroglyphs everywhere in the empire.
Mm-hmm.
And then 100 years later, somebody didn't like Pharaoh Rich Brown, so they came through and did the same thing. So this is not new, right? It's been around for a while, but it's wasteful, right? It's taking up time and effort.
Cain etched out Abel. That's there you go.
Yeah, and so I would like to see a little bit more of an adult approach to writing the executive orders in the first place,
mm-hmm.
and then letting things stand if they're working. To Willwood's point the other night that was on your show, I have some philosophical issues with executive orders in the first place. Mm-hmm. Roosevelt issuing 3,900 of them in his 12 years in office is terrifying to me.
Yes.
I'd rather see things go through the legislative process. The problem these days is that the legislative process is largely frozen, and you just simply can't get anything through because no one over on the Hill is doing anything other than raising funds and throwing rocks at people on the other side of the aisle. I don't know about you, but I'm not really comfortable paying $200,000 a year to each and every one of those knuckleheads for them to throw rocks at each other.
Neither.
I can go out in the front yard and watch my kids throw rocks at each other. I don't need that from my federal government.
No.
But
that's a separate problem. I mean, at the executive level, what can you do? And that's where they're. Right. And see, that's another thing. Congress really, as I understand it, Congress really has the tariff, and it slid to the executive branch because they didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, it's in the Constitution.
Yeah,
they
so
have the right to raise funds and set tariffs.
Yeah, so it's like if you're not going to do it, screw it, I'll do it.
Right.
But I want to talk about Colombia when it comes to immigration. The speed with which this happened yesterday tells me that he had that. I'm ready with this stick.
Yep.
For any Latin American country, the first one that pops their head up.
Yeah.
Okay. 25% tariffs at the end of the first week, it's going to be 45%. All your visas will be canceled. Whoa.
Is he throwing? I couldn't understand from the text whether or not he's throwing out all of their diplomats or not, or if he's just.
It sounded like I'm going to revoke the visas of your diplomats.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me too. And look, are we a huge trading partner for the Colombians? I don't know. But I'm sure they're making some money off of us. So I can't say you're wrong, Rich. He clearly was waiting for someone to stick their head up, and he mashed them. And of course, it's a joke I always used to make about people who wanted to date my eldest daughter. You kill the first one, and you hope the rest get the word, right?
Mm-hmm.
You hammer that first kid that comes to the door, and then you don't have to worry about it for a few more years. Mm-hmm. I think by doing what he just did, he sent a very clear message. We're sending these people home. They're yours, and they've come here illegally. In a lot of cases, they've committed, violent criminal offenses in the United States. We've taken in millions of your people over the last few years, and we're going to correct that, or we're going to change that. Now, that's upsetting a lot of people. There's a lot of people that are very upset about that. I get it. I absolutely get it. But a country without borders isn't really a country. And you've been to a bunch of third world countries in this world. I've been to a bunch of third world countries in this world. I understand why people want to come here. I absolutely do. And I have great friends who have immigrated to this country lawfully. They've gone through the rigmarole, the 7-year-long process to get citizenship, and have become citizens. And
it probably costs them tens of thousands of dollars, I would imagine, and attorney's fees and all kinds of fees.
And so when you just let people walk here and ignore the laws that surround that process, ignore the process, not only does it violate our borders, but it also invalidates the effort that the people that did it right put forth, right? If you don't enforce the rules, then why have the rules? Mm-hmm. and look, you go back and watch State of the Union speeches from Clinton on, maybe even Reagan. They all talk about the need for immigration reform. 100%. Both sides of the aisle have been screaming about this for 30 years. At one time or another in that 30 years, each party has had control of Congress and the White House. Did any of them pass anything on the immigration reform?
Meaningful? No.
Nothing. It's all come from the executive branch. based on politics.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then my question becomes, well, if this is really a hot button issue for you, President X the Republican, X the Democrat, when you had control, when you could have made a change, I would think that the hot button issues would have been the top of your list. This is one that you say is a hot button issue, yet you did not fix it.
Mm-hmm.
They both had a chance to fix it. Fix, I put in quotations because my fix might not be your fix. Your fix might not be my fix. But they could have addressed it. Neither side has. Why not? Well, it's a money-making issue, right? Right now, the people on the left are making bank on donations for those that are upset about the immigration policies. And when the next guy comes in that's a Democrat, the Republicans start screaming foul, they're going to make bank. I mean, you'd have to be completely foolish not to think that President Trump didn't make a ton of money in his re-election coffers over the last 4 years off of the immigration situation, disaster, however you want to couch it, on our southern border. I would have. If I was in his position, I'd be screaming. I was trying to build a wall. Look at this nonsense. And every single time one of them committed a crime, I'd be plowing it through all of my propaganda arms and trying to get the word out there. See, if you'd have listened to me, I'd have fixed it. Give me money. And now what's going to happen is the people that are on the outs, the left, is going to be saying, "Oh my God, this dictatorial fascist is throwing all these innocent, what does Obama call them? Dream seekers or dreamer. All these dreamers that wanted to come to the United States are here. They're doing the right thing. They're innocent. They haven't broken any laws other than all the immigration laws. This is horrible. Give me money. I'll fix it."
But I think that's where Trump has been like, hey, we get these people coming in on an H-1B visa we're educating them. They're going to our universities. They're paying their taxes. They're doing good things. They're not committing crimes. Why not keep those? So I think it also speaks to I'm not an anti-immigration guy. I'm Trump. I mean, I've married 2 damn immigrants. My mother was an immigrant. I'm all about immigration. And I think he's doing it the right way morally too. Let's start with the criminals, the convicts, the people that are sitting in our detention facilities for raping and killing people. But people are not even with that. I mean, what was it, 148 Democrats voted against the Laken Riley bill, to get them out of here?
Yeah,
I don't get it.
The deportation thing, I think it's going to get bigger he said very clearly this is going to be the biggest mass deportation.
But my point is you figure out the logistics now, right, of what that looks like as you're getting the criminals out. Number 2, you deal with a lot of who's going to pop their head up and what are they going to say, so that when you get to the mom and pops that you have to get out of here, you've worked out a lot of the bugs, I'm hoping.
Right. And I'm sure that will be smoothed out. There's going to be growing pains because, frankly, they haven't been deporting people for the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
People haven't been getting kicked out for the last 4 years. They've been, bureaucratically shuffled around.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to have to figure that out again. But, I'm watching the news the other night, and ICE was going out hammering different places. And when they grabbed Rich Brown, the felon, and he was sitting on T.C. Fuller, the non-felon illegal immigrant, they grabbed us both.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They threw the felon out. No, hey, we're not going to go look for T.C. Fuller, but, he's here aiding and abetting this guy. Bye. You're out of here. You're out of status. Goodbye. And look, if you don't like the way things are, I do, Mark. I do let my kids throw off each other. If you don't like the way the laws are set up, okay, we have a process for that too.
Right.
Change it. I got no problem with that. But we do, I think, as a general statement to what I said earlier about being able to push back on your own party, push back on the people that you agree with.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make sure that we are passing laws that pass the smell test.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've said on the show before, everything the Nazis did was legal under German law. Everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were very, very diligent about passing laws that supported what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say pass a law and change it, I mean it. But let's be on our guard for how these laws are written and what they say, and do they represent the sort of nation we want to be.
Back to our discussion about the Bureau, you said something, and I was going to say it then, but it stood on its own merit. But I'm gonna emphasize what you said. You said when Clinton was trying to do some stuff, you had Louis Freeh going, "Is it legal and is it right?" As in these are as if they were two separate things, because I believe they are. There's the morally right, and then there's the legally right, and we should be doing both.
And that's hard.
Yes,
It's
it is.
very hard, especially when you're in that bureaucracy. We've mentioned this on the show previously too. It's easy to say it was legal to put people on a train to Auschwitz in Germany. Mm-hmm. It wasn't morally right. Ergo, people should have said, no, we're not doing that. Mm-hmm. Okay, we can all agree on that. But let's talk about that in practical terms. Right. Rich Brown, 15-year guy with the Berlin Police Department. Mm-hmm. He vehemently disagrees with arresting and deporting off to Auschwitz his neighbor, T.C. Fuller, who happens to be Jewish. But it's legal, and Rich has a mortgage. He's got 3 kids. He's got to feed them. Things are tight. He can't really afford to be without a job right now. And, oh, by the way, if he loses his job on this particular issue, he might end up in prison. So what's, should Rich Brown take a moral stand on this? From the hindsight of 100 years later, 80 years later, yeah, absolutely he should. In the moment, it's a harder thing to do.
Did you read that book, Ordinary Men?
Oh, no. It was suggested to me a long time ago, but no, I haven't read it.
Yeah, I mean, because it speaks to exactly what you're saying, Dr. Fuller. Just the cliff notes is you've got a group of reserve military police officers. They're all middle-aged German men, butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers that are pulled into active service, and they're going to go execute these Ukrainian, Lithuanian Jews out in the hinterlands.
They're put into an Einsatzgruppen.
Yes, thank you. Right. So, and, some of them did, like, I can't do this. I will not do this. I have wife and children. And some of them, did it.
Right. And what's interesting to me is that the repercussions for those guys that said, I will not do it, were almost nil.
Yeah.
And the ones that did do it, oddly enough, were largely drunk most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was a mass, from what the information I've read, is that there was a lot of drinking going on in these units because people did struggle with this. And I like to think that our systems in the United States are set up to prevent that sort of thing.
But Milgram shows us they're not, brother.
Right. And that's my next point, was that we can't simply just say, well, the system will prevent it. Well, the system's made up of people, and we've got to be on our guard. And that feeds back to my earlier point that we do not owe blind obedience and acquiescence to any of these politicians. Mm-hmm. Let's face it, very few people that I know, yourself included, think that Trump is the greatest leader we've ever had in the White House. All right. We've all kind of been presented with a position since 2016 of less than, let's call, suboptimal choices in our presidential candidates. Okay. I mean, we really have. Mm-hmm. And I recognize that a lot of your viewers here are Trump supporters. I understand that. But if we look at it objectively, I think we can all say, look, we could get better people than we've seen run for president over the last 3, certainly the last 3 elections, maybe further back than that if you want to go crazy. So if he is not the perfect leader, then there's absolutely going to be flaws and mistakes that we can expect to be made. And I think we should feel free to say, I'm okay with this, and this. I'm not okay with that. Mm-hmm. If only to have the conversations amongst ourselves, and only so that we can put ourselves in a better position to pick the next candidate. Mm-hmm. Because he's president for the next 4 years. Okay. So we can, we should feel free to write letters and say, hey, I don't agree with that thing. Hey, this thing you did, this is awesome. This over here, not cool, dude. Because we seem to be out of that habit. Mm-hmm. We're more than happy to throw rocks when Biden says something we think is ridiculous. We'll write that letter. When our local congressman does something that's ridiculous, we'll write that letter. But when my guy that I voted for makes those mistakes, I think we need to be free to say no.
100%.
Because if we don't, then the extremist end of that particular train is Auschwitz, things that we don't want to have anything to do with. Personal opinion, could be wrong.
No, well said. See, Will Parker says the difficulty is to get good men to put themselves out to be crucified. Boy, ain't that true and scary.
Right. I mean, let's face it. You would be an excellent congressman. Do you have any intention of running for Congress?
Not a chance in hell.
Right. And is it because of you don't want the chance to serve, or is it because it's a knife fight in a phone booth?
Yep, exactly.
That's what keeps me from doing it. Hey, look, 6 years in Congress and I get a lifetime retirement check. That's pretty cool. I could suck up another 6 years in DC if I had to for that kind of thing. But do I want to get into American politics? No, I do not.
Yeah.
I just don't. That's to say that's even if I could win in the first place, which I doubt I could. But it's the system is selecting against the leaders that we need.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's the way the sausage is made, which scares me. It's like, okay, I'm going to vote for your thing, Rich. I need you to vote for my thing. And I'm looking at the text of it. I'm like, man, I really like the first 56 things on here. 57, 58, and 59, brother. I'm out. That's, I can't do it. And it's like, well, quid pro quo, man, or I'm going to make sure you're done. I mean, it's just gross to me. And it would be nice.
How much money did you raise? How much money did you raise for our coffers? Oh, you didn't raise enough money? Well, you're not getting on that committee that means a lot to you. Your law that you think, it might be a good law, you know what, but we're not going to let you put it forward because you didn't spend enough time in the call center and you didn't raise, enough money.
Right. It's gross. I can't be a part of that.
Yeah.
I want to get to, what do you think about these preemptive pardons? I know it's not necessarily on Trump's watch, but I think, the preemptive
it feeds into it. It feeds it. Yeah. Preemptive pardons to me, they pass the constitutional smell test. I mean, there's smarter constitutional scholars than I will ever be that have said, that's legal. I find them very distasteful.
Mm-hmm.
I read a Supreme Court ruling on it where they talked about how a preemptive pardon presupposes guilt.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to assume there's some level of guilt in order to pardon somebody. Okay, I'll buy that. There seems to be some legal perspective that allows that sort of thinking. I think we're going to see a lot more of it now. I really do. I think this has become a new coin of the realm because the door is open for political prosecutions now, right?
Oh yeah.
We've seen it in the last few years. So, it's funny to me that the Biden administration was in charge when a lot of these spurious, odd, precedent-setting charges took place, and then at the end they pardoned everybody. Because they're like, look, we just put this arrow in that guy's quiver. Let's pardon everybody that we think he might shoot with it.
Mm-hmm.
And the pardons thing, this is what actually got me thinking about being able to disagree with both sides. Because how many pardons did Biden issue in the last 24 hours of his administration? 1,300 or some crazy number like that. I mean, it was insane. And a total of 4,300 over the course of his time of pardons and commutations in the course of his time in office, 4 years. Record setting, doubled the number 2 guy who was Obama, interestingly enough. So you get all upset about that. And of course, I'm very upset that he commuted the sentence on Leonard Peltier, who was convicted of executing 2 FBI agents, whose pin, by the way, I'm wearing today. So you get upset about that. And then 24 hours later, we get blanket pardons for January 6th or blanket pardons and commutations. And look, because I know I just tripped a trigger for you. Talking about January 6th, a lot of those people did not deserve what they got.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely didn't. Okay, they scared congressmen, and the congressmen went ballistic, and they had the right guy in office to go after them. Mm-hmm. A lot of those people were tourists. Mm-hmm. They weren't all tourists.
Correct.
If you punched a cop, if you stun gunned a cop,
bye-bye.
I got no. Sorry, you don't deserve a pardon or a commutation. You get 12 years for assaulting a police officer. Bye. Yeah. You can't tell me, it was a politically inspired prosecution. No, in your particular case, it was not. Mm-hmm. So I have a problem with President Trump's blanket pardoning. And in my mind, there's enough room under my dislike tent for Biden and Trump in that regard.
Well, right? Didn't he's holding off on 200 or 300, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But some of the ones that he has already commuted and pardoned in my mind, had problems. Now, look, in the grand scheme of things, he pardons 1,200 people and buys, additional loyalty from millions. That's a wise investment on his part. Mm-hmm. And he's going to lose the loyalty of people that probably didn't really want to vote for him in the first place. It's right up there with Hillary Clinton saying, calling Trump supporters deplorables. Mm-hmm. She's not losing anybody that she already had, and she's gaining the people that she wants. She's shoring up the support of the people that she has. That's what he's doing. Okay. I just find it distasteful. And I find it very difficult to throw rocks at Biden for his pardons and not throw rocks at Trump for his.
Yeah. And Alan Kelly says distasteful on both sides. The Trump January 6 pardons affected some of my fellow troopers. They were taking the brunt of the assaults on the entrance point that was shown on national television. And I agree with Gerald too. Each of those pardons should have been considered individually. If it isn't the same event with a written statement on why the pardon being issued, I agree with that also, because you can't come in and say, I'm a pro law enforcement president, and then you blanket pardon all these people.
Right.
It had to be, here's one for TC, here's one for Rich. This guy, rot,
Right.
It have to be.
And this is my point about you. You need to be able to question your leaders. You need to be able to say, I agree with this. I generally support you on these things. This is wildly out of spec.
And I tell you, that is where I fall in on. He gave a pardon to Ross Ulrich. You remember that guy?
I do not.
He was the guy who started the Silk Road on the dark web.
Ah, okay.
The Dread Pirate Roberts, or whatever his call sign was on the dark web. But he set up, for those that don't know, he set up an online marketplace. You paid with Bitcoin. And this was 15 years ago or whatever. You could buy heroin, you could buy C4, you could buy anything. It looked like Amazon, and you paid with Bitcoin. And the FBI was all over this guy for a long time now. And he gave him if you want to give the guy a commutation, I'm kind of okay with that. He spent 12 years behind bars on a multiple time life sentence. The guy was an Eagle Scout. He'd never, ever had a record. He's a libertarian, thought, hey, man, consenting adults should be able to get whatever they want anytime they want. But the problem was, I think there was 6 people that OD'd on some of those drugs. So those deaths to me are potentially on his hands. I believe there was some hitmen plying their trade on there. So I don't think he deserves a full unconditional pardon. Commutation, maybe. And another thing I have a problem with Ross is the government was willing to make a deal because some FBI agents and some DEA agents really screwed the pooch. And some of them went to jail for their mishandling of the situation. But so they were willing to make a deal with him, like, hey, man, we'll give you 5 years, 10 years. You just plead guilty and help us out. And him and his legal team, I guess, were like, no. They didn't think he would get hammered, and he got hammered. So I disagree with that. But I think, again, Trump is trying to secure the libertarian base who really support this guy.
Right. And so that, these are the political machinations that are part and parcel of politics. Mm-hmm. You don't have to like them all. But again, blindly following a guy because he's going to drain a swamp, or blindly following the guy because he's going to let all the dreamers in the country, is a mistake. It just is. None of these people will lift a finger for you as an individual. They don't know who you are. They don't care about you as an individual. They're trying to guide the ship of state, and things are going to get run over in that process. So I have a problem with any blind obedience. I really do.
Me too.
So
pretty slow, man. I want to talk about, because on the pardons, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Millie, who I despise him like no other man that's ever worn the uniform, really.
Yeah. I understand your perspective on that. Frankly, as soon as Afghanistan happened and he blamed the politicians, he should have, in my mind, he should have resigned.
He should have,
or at least retired.
Yeah.
You know what? I can't work for these people. They won't listen to me, and as a result, people died. I can't stick around. When he stuck around, that's when I lost all respect for the man.
Yeah, you're part of the problem. And I mean, I could go. There's a whole different ways, but I would really sit my legal team in to look at the way the pardon is written and what it is, because if we can bring him back on active duty, at least to cashier him in some way, strip him of his tabs, whatever, remove his special forces qualifications tabs and some of the other things, and just cashier the hell out of this guy. Maybe he gets to keep his retirement and his book deals and all this other stuff, but the ranks need to see that if you do what he did, if it had been Captain Fuller, Chief Warrant Officer Brown, Sergeant Kelly, anybody on here, dude, you would be rotting in Leavenworth.
Yep.
Rotting.
Yeah. So I laugh now when I hear people say, this is a nation of laws.
Really?
It's a nation of selectively enforced laws. And frankly, you could at the very least with Millie, you could yank his security clearance, and in the yanking of his security clearance, you get to put a document that says why you did it, and you could just hammer the crap out of him in that document, right? And now you're not convicting him of a crime. Some state prosecutor out there could get him, right? I mean, that's what we learned from the Biden administration, right? Is, if the president doesn't want to go after a former president, what he can do is stand by idly while the state of New York goes after him on some spurious, odd little charges. So I think we're going to see that a lot more. Perhaps Trump has that in the works, or perhaps there are people out there that will lone wolf it. Right? I'm the state's attorney in a state where 2 soldiers from my constituency died in Afghanistan on that botched withdrawal. Mm-hmm. I'm going to charge Milley. Mm-hmm. I convict him, but it's not my money I'm spending in this prosecution, and I'm just going to drag him through it. I'm going to make him go hire a defense attorney. I'm going to make him show up because it's a state charge. You weren't pardoned for state charging. And I'm going to say you were the proximate cause of 2 deaths of my people in my state or my town or my city or whatever. And I'm going to charge you with manslaughter. And now all of a sudden you're going to raise your own profile in the national view. Everybody on the right wing that hates Milley is going to be like, you are cool. I like you. Why don't you run for higher office? And maybe Milley loses.
Yeah, I was looking because, Trump said in years gone by, he would have faced a firing squad for what he did. And I'm paraphrasing. And of course, they brought that up to Milley on his 60-minute interview. And so it got me thinking, when is the last time someone in America was executed for treason? And the best I could find was a guy named Mumford in New Orleans. And so Benjamin Butler takes over. He's the military commander in charge of New Orleans when he attacks in there and seizes that port city during the Civil War. And he had Mumford hanged for tearing down an American flag. That's all he did.
Wow.
But he sent a precedent. Like I told you, I put these orders up. He violated one of them. I've been given the authority by the commander in chief to do summary executions. And your ass is going to be hung in the courtyard tomorrow morning. And they did.
Yeah. Well,
people told the line. So,
I
think Milley needs to be, he's got to, or it's going to be bad.
Yeah. And there's something to be said for that, right? You do need to send these precedents. You do need to enforce the laws, because if you don't enforce the standard, you've set a new standard, right? The last NCO I ever had to UCMJ in my career was an E7 that was sleeping with one of his subordinate E6's wives. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's a non-starter. You just can't have that, right? For a whole lot of reasons. And when I heard about it, I showed up and I called him in. And of course the staff sergeant involved had, he was a smart guy. Mm-hmm. And he, had his ducks in a row, and he had a bunch of, these are the problems, but none of it was proof. And the E7 comes in, he was a smart guy. And he's like, well, nothing happened. We were just talking. You can't prove otherwise. And he was right. So, okay, you're right. So here's the deal. I'm going to order you not to have contact with that female. No contact, period. I don't want semaphore, Aldous lamp, letters, phone calls, none of it. Carrier pigeons, no contact. Okay. 3 weeks later, I'm out of town on something. The E6 follows his wife to a hotel, sees the E7 go in. They stay there all night. The E6 calls me. I call my XO. XO goes out there. XO sees them emerge from the hotel room the next morning. I come back into town, sit the E7 down. I'm like, tell me this wasn't adultery. He's like, nope, wasn't adultery. We were just talking the whole time. I said, okay. And he kind of had that same little grin on his face that you've got right now. I was like, I know you can't get me, because he knew under UCMJ I couldn't get him on adultery unless one of the two of them confessed. Right. Neither of them was going to confess. So he thought he was good to go. I was like, but you're not. You see, because you violated a direct order. And remember, I had you sign this counseling statement acknowledging the direct order, and he got crushed. Now, did he get crushed for what he did? Arguably. And then later she came to my office and confessed in an attempt to save her marriage. And I went back to the battalion commander and says, hey, now I want to field grade Article 15 this guy.
Bingo.
Wow, you already hammered him. I said, because now I've got him for adultery. Before I got him for failure to follow a lawful order. And the sergeant major lost his mind. Absolutely not. You can't do this, sir. I'm like, why not?
Yeah, exactly. Point
being, there are more than one way to skin a cat.
Yep.
And sometimes that cat needs to be skinned because now the word's out, right? There is a reason we make examples out of things. And it's because it works. So if a guy like Milley getting away with what he got away with without any punishment, any substantive punishment, I think sends the wrong message.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And hopefully he will get his day. Now let's talk about the last. I'll kind of close on this. I know I said we'd get to DEI, but we'll have to do another one of these, Dr. Fuller.
Oh no, not that.
Will Wood is on. Good morning, Will.
Hey, good for Will. How's his
Will,
hair?
he will be back on next Monday. I'm sorry. He said, I got a late start on the show. About 5% of Colombia's GDP is exports to the USA. To answer that question,
Okay.
imports from the USA is about an equal dollar amount.
So that becomes a wash for them. And a 5% hit on your GDP in a week, that's attention getting.
Yeah, it is.
Because you wouldn't let 2 flights come in, and it's only going to get worse.
I'd be like, look, I'm gonna put parachutes on these people and swing them out the back of the damn cargo bay, and you could pick them up
on a
out
boat. I'm going to land them on your beach.
Yeah. You're getting them whether you want them or not. You can play nice, and we can, or not. They're your citizens. Now, what's going to be interesting is, as I understand it, China has never allowed people come back in because they got to get a visa to come back in, and they've refused to allow anybody to come back in. So that one's going to be. Colombia is probably a dry run, but China's going to be a whole nother thing.
So what do we do with the Chinese expats that we have?
Maybe they're not over here. I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
Well, there's plenty of new islands the Chinese have made all over the Pacific. We can probably drop them off on those.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be fun. The 17 inspector generals that got fired, I don't know anything about that, who they were, why they were fired. The commandant of the Coast Guard got fired. I mean, like what, day 1, day 2?
Yeah, day 1.
Man, that sends a huge message.
And of course, picking the female to be your first hit, probably in this day and age probably wasn't the smartest move. But it sends a clear message. And firing the inspectors general, I think that will allow him to put people in there that are going to support the agenda. But I think it also opens the door for people to start screaming foul. Mm-hmm. But again, you're just going to have to deal with it. All these things have a cost. So as long as you understand the cost going into it and you're willing to pay it. It's like my kids, right? You do that, you're going to get grounded for 2 weeks. And then they just do a cost benefit analysis. Well, is it worth 2 weeks of being on restriction? Yeah, it is. And bang, they do it. Or you, right? Is it worth paying $100 to go 50 miles an hour over the speed limit? Sure.
Yeah.
It's because I'm just paying for the privilege. It's not a fine. It's paying for the privilege. So you got to make it painful enough that the cost benefit works out in the direction you want it to work out in.
100%. Well, Dr. Fuller, I kept you on here for an hour and a half. We seriously need to. I'm looking at my list of stuff I wanted to talk to you about. We got through about a third of it. So we'll have to do this again soon.
Absolutely. Well, Rich, it's going to be 4 years of interesting.
Yeah.
It's going to be 4 years of interesting.
And if you do want to read about the details of life of an FBI agent for more than 20 years, please pick up Painting Over Rust, Dr. T.C. Fuller's book, 20-Year Odyssey in the Bureau, as well as Empathy for the Devil, talking about interrogating terrorists down in Guantanamo Bay for the FBI. Dr. Fuller, thank you so much for your sage advice this morning, brother.
Thank you, Rich. And, do your research, put some thought into it, because you got to be ready. That fight is coming. Be ready.